One overlooked safety protocol, one moment of celebration, one structural failure. That's all it takes to transform the happiest day of someone's life into an unthinkable tragedy that will haunt families forever. These 5 wedding disasters prove that even the most joyous occasions can become scenes of devastating loss when tradition meets negligence. It was May 21st, 2016, along the Wilmington River waterfront in Savannah, Georgia. Humid air clung to a weathered wooden pier, extending into brackish water as the afternoon temperature reached 84 degrees. Light clouds drifted overhead, offering brief relief from the coastal heat. Arthur Moss, 62, stood adjusting his navy blue suit jacket near the pier's entrance. The retired dock supervisor carried himself with the rigid posture of a man who had spent 4 decades enforcing safety protocols at the port. His weathered hands, scarred from years of handling cargo equipment, smoothed his tie as he watched venue staff make final preparations. Arthur's practical nature had made him question the pier's suitability months earlier, but his daughter's vision for a waterfront ceremony had prevailed. The bride, his 29-year-old daughter who worked as an event planner in Atlanta, had selected this historic pier for its romantic appeal. She had dismissed Arthur's concerns about the structure's age and condition, citing the venue's popularity for weddings. The pier had been flagged by city inspectors for load restrictions earlier that spring, though it remained open for limited use. Temporary plywood panels had been installed along the central walkway to create a wider aisle for the procession. The seasonal workers who installed them lacked structural engineering expertise. No professional had evaluated whether the modifications compromised the pier's integrity. The original wooden planking showed visible gaps where salt water had corroded the underlying support beams. 140 guests filled white folding chairs arranged in rows along both sides of the extended aisle. A handheld camera operated by the bride's cousin captured footage from the front row, while a hired drone pilot positioned his aircraft 50 feet overhead for aerial shots. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 4:30 p.m. Arthur took his daughter's arm as the string quartet began the processional music. The guests rose simultaneously from their chairs, introducing dynamic loading and vibration across the pier's central span that stressed already corroded connections. The sudden shift in distribution stressed the corroded bolt connections beneath the central span. As father and daughter stepped onto the modified aisle, the drone footage captured the procession from above. Arthur's measured pace reflected his awareness of the pier's age, though he showed no visible concern. They had walked approximately 30 feet when corroded bolt connections at the pier's midpoint failed in rapid succession under combined dynamic load. The central section of the aisle collapsed inward without warning. Arthur fell 18 feet through the broken planking onto a mixture of exposed timber supports and concrete footings below. The initial impact caused multiple rib fractures and bilateral lung collapse. Secondary debris, including collapsing structural timbers, caused catastrophic pelvic trauma and massive uncontrolled hemorrhaging. The drone's overhead footage showed the collapsed section of the pier and a motionless figure beneath broken planks, partially obscured by splintered wood and twisted metal brackets. His daughter had been thrown clear of the collapse zone and suffered only minor abrasions. Emergency responders arrived within 9 minutes of the initial 911 call. Paramedics descended into the debris field, but found no vital signs. Arthur was pronounced dead at 4:47 p.m. from blunt force trauma and massive internal hemorrhage. The wedding ceremony was immediately terminated. Guests were evacuated from the remaining sections of the pier, while a blue tarp was positioned over the collapse site. The drone footage was secured by investigators as part of the official inquiry. The subsequent investigation concluded that the pier's load capacity had been significantly exceeded during the ceremony, accelerating the structural failure. The temporary plywood modifications had created additional stress points that accelerated the failure of already compromised connections. No structural engineer had approved the aisle extension. Arthur Moss died beneath the temporary aisle during the wedding ceremony. Investigators later confirmed the collapse was caused by excessive loading on a structurally compromised pier. While Arthur Moss fell through rotting wood, hundreds of miles away in Utah, Holly Vance was preparing for what should have been a magical exit from her own ceremony. The sparkling tradition awaiting her had been performed safely thousands of times before. It was August 12, 2017, in Provo, Utah, as late summer heat lingered over the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains. Daytime temperatures had reached 89 degrees, cooling to 76 by 8:30 p.m., while intermittent canyon winds gusted through the outdoor venue. The ceremony had just ended on a grassy slope overlooking Utah Valley. String lights hung above rows of white folding chairs as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the first stars appeared. A light breeze moved through the reception area, where guests prepared for the evening send-off. Holly Vance, 27, stood near the venue's stone archway, adjusting her full-length wedding gown. The elementary school teacher's attention to detail showed in every aspect of the ceremony planning. Her methodical nature had guided months of preparation, though her non-confrontational personality had led her to accept suggestions she privately questioned. The synthetic lace dress featured intricate beadwork and a flowing train that extended 4 feet behind her. Her new husband, a 31-year-old logistics coordinator, had organized the sparkler send-off as the evening's finale. 12 wedding attendants and 90 guests, including several young children, had gathered to form a tunnel leading from the ceremony site to the reception area. The groom's practical background in coordinating shipments had not extended to event safety protocols. Long metal sparklers, each measuring 20 inches in length, were distributed to every guest without accompanying safety instructions. No fire extinguishers were positioned nearby, and venue staff had not been briefed on emergency procedures. Children as young as 6 were positioned at the front of the tunnel, closest to where the couple would pass. 2 smartphones captured the scene from different angles. One guest recorded from the reception area, facing the approaching couple, while another filmed from behind to document their exit through the sparkling archway. The wind continued to gust intermittently, causing the sparklers to flicker and bend toward the center of the tunnel. As Holly and her husband began their walk through the tunnel, the sparklers created a canopy of white-hot sparks approximately 6 feet above the ground. The metal rods burned at temperatures capable of exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit at the tip, sending cascades of molten particles into the evening air. Holly's train dragged along the grass behind her. A sparkler held by a child in the front row tilted downward as the wind gusted, bringing the burning tip into contact with the lower hem of Holly's dress. The synthetic lace fabric ignited instantly upon contact with the superheated metal. Flames spread upward along the dress with remarkable speed, following the synthetic fibers and beadwork. Within seconds, flames driven by wind and rising heat traveled from the hem to Holly's waist. She stumbled forward as the flames reached her torso, the synthetic material melting and adhering to her skin. The rapid combustion created superheated gases that she inhaled, causing immediate swelling in her airway passages. Her breathing became labored as oxygen flow was restricted. Guests attempted to extinguish the flames using their bare hands and clothing, but the synthetic material continued burning. Several attendants suffered second-degree burns. Holly collapsed onto the grass as fire enveloped her lower body, with the front-facing smartphone capturing the collapse as her movements slowed and stopped. Emergency responders arrived within 6 minutes of the initial emergency call. Paramedics found Holly unconscious with severe thermal injuries covering 40% of her body. Despite immediate medical intervention, she suffered cardiac arrest due to severe inhalation injury and extensive thermal burns and was pronounced dead after resuscitation efforts failed. 7 guests required treatment for burns sustained while attempting the rescue. The reception was immediately canceled, and the venue was cleared by emergency personnel. Both smartphone recordings were secured by investigators as part of the official inquiry. The investigation determined that the synthetic fabric had ignited at a temperature consistent with sparkler contact. Wind conditions had contributed to the sparkler's displacement, while the absence of safety equipment prevented effective fire suppression. As emergency responders worked frantically in Utah, Lana Brooks was raising her 4th glass of champagne at a Milwaukee reception, surrounded by celebrating friends. The evening was unfolding exactly as planned. It was October 14, 2015, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as evening temperatures dropped to 42 degrees. Inside a historic ballroom, warm chandelier light reflected off polished hardwood floors while Lake Michigan lay dark beyond the windows. The indoor wedding reception was in full swing by 9 p.m., with 120 guests celebrating beneath exposed brick walls and vintage industrial fixtures. The open bar had been serving continuously since cocktail hour began at 6 p.m., with no scheduled breaks or water service stations positioned near the head table. Multiple toasts had been planned consecutively as part of the evening's entertainment program. Lana Brooks, 34, sat at the head table wearing a burgundy bridesmaid dress and holding her fourth glass of champagne. The real estate assistant's competitive personality had driven her to participate enthusiastically in every drinking game organized by the wedding party. Her habitual weekend binge drinking had built a tolerance that masked the severity of her intoxication from concerned friends. The maid of honor, a 36-year-old marketing professional, had already delivered her prepared speech when Lana decided to offer an impromptu toast. The bartender, a temporary hire without certification in responsible alcohol service, had continued serving drinks without monitoring consumption levels. No venue staff had been trained to recognize signs of dangerous intoxication. A smartphone positioned on the gift table recorded the speeches from approximately 15 feet away, capturing audio and video of the head table area. The footage showed Lana consuming multiple shots of vodka during a bridesmaid drinking game before standing unsteadily to address the crowd. As Lana rose from her chair to deliver her unscheduled toast, her coordination was severely impaired by visible intoxication with pronounced imbalance and slurred speech. She swayed noticeably while attempting to speak, her words slurred and barely audible over the background music and conversation. Within seconds of standing, Lana lost her balance and fell backward. Her head struck the hardwood dance floor with significant force, the impact occurring at the base of her skull where it met her neck. The fall caused immediate loss of consciousness and a severe head injury. The head trauma triggered vomiting while Lana remained unconscious and lying on her back. Her severely impaired gag reflex, compromised by alcohol poisoning, failed to clear the vomit from her airway. The aspirated material blocked oxygen flow to her lungs as she lay motionless on the dance floor. Wedding guests initially assumed Lana had simply passed out from excessive drinking, a conclusion that delayed immediate medical intervention. The smartphone continued recording as several attendees approached but hesitated to assist, uncertain whether her condition required emergency care. After several minutes, guests realized her breathing was irregular and ineffective, and attempted CPR despite airway obstruction. However, the aspirated vomit had already caused severe oxygen deprivation to her brain and vital organs. Her breathing was irregular and ineffective as her condition visibly deteriorated. Emergency responders arrived 11 minutes after the initial 911 call. They found Lana unresponsive, with no detectable pulse or spontaneous breathing. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, including intubation and cardiac medications, she was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined that Lana died from aspiration of gastric contents compounded by blunt force head trauma. Post-mortem toxicology later measured her blood alcohol concentration at 0.24%. The combination of alcohol poisoning and head injury had created a fatal scenario. The wedding reception ended immediately as guests were asked to leave the venue. The smartphone recording was turned over to investigators as part of the investigation. The venue was closed for professional cleaning and remained shuttered for 3 days. The subsequent investigation found no criminal negligence, though it highlighted the dangers of excessive alcohol service without proper monitoring. The venue implemented new policies requiring certified bartenders and mandatory water stations at all future events. Lana Brooks died on the dance floor after collapsing during an unscheduled toast. The medical examiner attributed her death to aspiration following acute alcohol intoxication and head trauma. We've got more disturbing wedding tragedies coming up, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how a day meant for love can turn fatal in seconds. As investigators processed the Milwaukee scene, Felix Wade was running excitedly around a California backyard, drawn to the colorful attraction that promised hours of innocent fun. It was June 3, 2018, in California's Central Valley, where afternoon temperatures reached 97 degrees under clear skies. Dry winds swept across farmland as a wind advisory warned of gusts up to 25 miles per hour, intensified by thermal updrafts by mid-afternoon. The backyard reception took place on a 2-acre farm property with tables under white canopies. Recently cut grass remained uneven from gopher holes, and a large inflatable bounce house sat near a sloped edge. Felix Wade, 5, ran between guests wearing khaki shorts and a blue polo shirt. The preschooler's boundless energy had kept him moving constantly since the ceremony ended. His curiosity and fearless nature made him gravitate toward the inflatable attractions. Felix's parents worked in agricultural management and had driven 3 hours from Bakersfield for his aunt's wedding. The bride, his 33-year-old aunt who managed a local credit union, had rented the bounce house to entertain the 40 children among her 160 guests. The rental operator had delivered and inflated the structure that morning, but left before the reception began. No staff member remained to monitor the equipment or provide safety instructions. The bounce house had been secured with metal stakes driven approximately 18 inches into the hard-packed earth. However, the stakes were not fully inserted to their recommended depth of 24 inches, and the tension straps remained loose. The rental company's protocol required constant adult supervision, but no guest had been assigned this responsibility. A GoPro camera mounted inside recorded the children's activities from a corner position. The footage showed Felix and 7 other children jumping as the wind intensified. The inflatable structure swayed noticeably as gusts struck its 12-foot-high walls. A sudden wind gust, intensified by thermal updrafts and inadequate anchoring, struck the bounce house from the west. The inadequately anchored structure lifted on one side, causing the children inside to tumble toward the lower end. Felix was positioned near the center when the inflatable became airborne. The bounce house rotated counterclockwise as it lifted approximately 10 to 12 feet above the ground. The GoPro footage captured Felix being thrown against the interior mesh walls as the structure rotated violently during its brief flight. Other children slid toward the openings as the inflatable lost shape. The structure traveled roughly 30 feet before descending. Felix was ejected headfirst through the main entrance during the second rotation, falling approximately 12 feet onto the packed dirt surface. The impact caused severe head trauma and a fatal cervical spine injury. The deflating bounce house settled partially on Felix's motionless body. Wedding guests rushed to lift the heavy vinyl material within seconds. Felix showed no signs of consciousness, pulse, or breathing. His neck was positioned at an unnatural angle, and he remained unresponsive. Emergency responders arrived within 11 minutes of the emergency call. Despite immediate resuscitation attempts, Felix was pronounced dead at the scene from traumatic brain injury and cervical spine dislocation. 7 other children sustained minor injuries. The wedding reception ended immediately as guests were evacuated from the property. The bounce house was deflated and removed that evening. The GoPro footage was seized as evidence as part of the investigation. The investigation revealed that anchor stakes had been installed to insufficient depth and tension straps were improperly secured. Wind conditions exceeded the manufacturer's recommended operational limits of 15 miles per hour. The investigation concluded that inadequate anchoring and the absence of active supervision allowed the inflatable to become airborne under hazardous wind conditions. While Felix's family grieved in California, Caleb Rice was kneeling in Alabama sand, confidently preparing a spectacular finale for a beachside celebration. His experience with electrical work had given him the confidence to handle the task ahead. It was July 7, 2016, when the evening air along Gulf Shores, Alabama carried the humid warmth of summer across the white sand beaches. The temperature had reached 91 degrees during the day and remained at 82 degrees as sunset approached over the Gulf of Mexico. A gentle offshore breeze moved at 8 miles per hour, carrying the scent of salt water and the distant sound of waves breaking against the shore. The sky was clear with excellent visibility extending miles over the water. The beachfront wedding ceremony had concluded on a private stretch of sand bordered by sea oats and dune grass. 80 guests gathered on the beach as the sun painted the horizon in shades of orange and pink. Tiki torches provided flickering light along the ceremony area. while string lights connected wooden posts driven into the sand. The reception was planned to continue with a private fireworks display. Caleb Rice, 28, knelt in the sand, adjusting the placement of mortar tubes approximately 50 feet from the guest seating area. The electrical apprentice's confidence with tools and pyrotechnic devices had made him volunteer for the setup when no licensed operator could be secured. His impulsive personality and hands-on approach to problem-solving had served him well in construction work, though he lacked formal training in fireworks safety. The groom, his longtime friend who worked in commercial fishing, had purchased the fireworks from a roadside stand without consulting safety regulations. The display included 12 consumer-grade mortar shells ranging from 3 to 4 inches in diameter, designed to launch 200 to 400 feet into the air. No professional pyrotechnician had been hired due to budget constraints. The mortar tubes had been placed directly into the loose sand without proper stabilization or angled positioning. Standard safety protocols required concrete bases and precise angles to ensure vertical launches, but these materials were not available. The tubes were positioned in a rough line parallel to the water's edge. A chest-mounted action camera recorded Caleb's movements as he prepared the ignition sequence. The footage showed him connecting fuses between the mortar tubes to create a timed display. Guests remained seated in folding chairs positioned approximately 40 feet from the launch area, well inside the danger zone and far short of the recommended safety distance of at least 150 feet. As darkness settled over the beach, Caleb lit the master fuse and stepped back several feet to observe the display. The first mortar fired successfully, sending a burst of red and gold sparks 300 feet above the water. The second tube, inadequately secured in the shifting sand, tilted approximately 15 degrees from vertical as the shell ignited. The 4-inch mortar shell fired horizontally instead of skyward, traveling at high speed toward the guest area. The projectile struck Caleb in the center of his chest before he could react to the misfire. The shell's internal brake charge ignited at low altitude due to improper launch orientation, causing a premature aerial burst directly in front of him, releasing superheated gases and debris. The explosion caused catastrophic chest injuries and massive internal trauma. The force of the blast disrupted vital functions and threw him backward onto the sand, where he lay motionless as smoke and debris settled. The chest-mounted camera recorded Caleb's collapse and the immediate aftermath as wedding guests screamed and rushed toward the launch area. The remaining fireworks were quickly extinguished by guests using sand and water from nearby coolers. Several attendees sustained minor burns and cuts from debris. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes of the initial 911 call. Paramedics found Caleb unresponsive with massive chest trauma and no detectable vital signs. Despite immediate resuscitation attempts, he was pronounced dead at the scene from severe chest injuries caused by blast trauma. The beach was immediately cleared of all guests and secured by authorities. The remaining fireworks were handled by explosive disposal technicians, and the action camera footage was secured as evidence. The wedding reception was canceled permanently. The investigation revealed that the mortar tubes lacked proper stabilization and had been positioned too close to spectators. No licensed pyrotechnician had overseen the display. The investigation concluded that improper setup and the absence of professional oversight led to the fatal fireworks incident. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.